this group at this time of year? Like, does it change when everyone's fighting for the playoffs?
Well, I think it does. I mean, it's only natural to see where you're at. You're ahead of people. That's great. But you have to be desperate to stay ahead. And, you know, I think if we look back to the last game, I don't want to talk a lot about the last game, but if there's one piece missing, you'd say the desperation. You know, and that was the disappointing part of the game. You can win and lose, but the desperation piece for us was not where it needs to be, and it'll be there tomorrow night.
Is there something technical that you're seeing from teams in general, you're seeing from every team at this time of year?
I don't think so. To me, you know, desperation will. I think you know, who can raise their game consistently. We get into this part of the season, it's been a grind to get here. Okay, so that's part one. You give yourself a chance in a playoff race. Part two is, what are you going to do with it now? And this is really where you separate. Like your character has to come out. Your will to win has to be evident by your teammates, by your fans, by everybody.
We saw Arvidsson practice in a white jersey today. Is he on track to play tomorrow?
No, he's really close. He's really close. He doesn't like to practice in a red jersey. Just, I don't know why, but usually when you come back and you have your first practice in a long time with the team, you're almost always in red. So it just might be a situation where we didn't want to just put him in that color. But he's close. He is close.
But if he does go, how are you going to utilize him? Can you use him at 17 minutes a night to start? Are you going to ease him back in, do you think?
Well, I mean, I forget what the exact minutes were he played when he was off earlier this year, but it was 17 plus.
Right.
He's a really important player. Foxy and I just had the conversation on the determination, the will to win, the desperation. You see it in Victor Arvidsson. So it's hard when he's on the bench, despite having not played because of injury, it's hard not to put him on the ice. Yeah. So that's something I got to maybe be a little bit careful with. I talked to him about it, but when he gets in there, he's going to be 100%. And when he's 100%, he plays.
When he returned, you put him with Deneau and Moore right away, but Deneau, Moore, and Fiala have been an incredibly productive line.
Yeah.
Does that present you with a challenge trying to find a replacement?
Oh no, I don't look at it as a challenge at all. I look at it as options. You know what I mean? When you have good, healthy players like the ones you mentioned in your lineup, it just gives you more options to think about. Okay, who with who, why, who complements. So, yeah, maybe a mental challenge, I guess. But no, you're happy about that, and we'll figure that out. I mean, we know that Phil and Morsey and Arby have played together a lot and played very well themselves too. So we'll sort through that, but it'll be a good problem to have.
Maybe a little bit more internal competition too for Reichstein and that?
Yeah, well, I mean, you guys hear how I speak about RV. You saw when he's in, the ice time I gave him. So he doesn't short you. So he's going to get minutes for sure. So he's taking somebody's minutes. Who is it going to be? That's a good question, Evie.
Jim, since you've taken over, the Kings are top 5 in defense, bottom 5 in offense. How do you continue to have the good defense while also getting some offense?
No. Really good question. And what I would say is, we would have taken a top 5 defense and a bottom 5 offense in the Dallas game. We weren't a top 5 defensive team in the Dallas game, and you get behind early like that, it doesn't matter what you got for offense. They're done. The game's over. So we always want to create more offense for sure, but never at the cost of defense. It's so hard to score. It's so hard to outscore your mistakes in the league that if you start trying to focus on the wrong things, you're going to find yourself behind, and then trying to crawl back doesn't work very often. So we'll try in different ways. I think one is just our power play generating more. One, getting more opportunities. Two, being more efficient. That's usually been a strength of ours over the last little while, and scoring big, important goals. But, we're just not going to sacrifice defense for offense.
Does it make it easier to preach that message when your leaders are guys like Kopitar, Doughty, Deneau, who say that themselves? That's how they play the game.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'll include Deneau for sure, but if you just look at Drew and Kopi, we can start there because everybody's seen them from a long time. They've seen them hoist the Stanley Cup twice. So all of us can have ideas about how the game's supposed to be played. Go ask the 2 guys who've lifted the cup how the game has to be played. And they're the models of good offensive players, no question, but they don't sacrifice it for defense. So, yeah, that's who you talk to. They know how to win, and that's ultimately all our goal is to win.
Jim, I'd like to ask you something a little larger on Q. As someone like yourself who's worked with a bunch of high-quality offensive players, forwards, throughout your career, I don't want to ask you about his ceiling because everybody's asking him about his ceiling. But how do you see Q's game growing in what areas in 2 weeks, maybe 2 months, 2 years?
Well, I mean, yeah, you start projecting out too far, it's hard to do that. I just see that the first piece you have to have is a work ethic and a determination and a physicality. I think those, I haven't been here the whole time with Q, but those to me now, if you talk about development, those have developed and those to me are in place. That's the most important. Now, layer on the skills, the confidence that comes with that, you know, and who knows what the limit is. I would never project out and put a ceiling on him because he has the core principles in place. Hardest thing to do. A lot of players come in the league, they have the skills, and getting the other part is the harder part. He's got that part, so now let's just see where he takes his game. I'm excited to see where his game goes, and I know that if he scores, great. If he doesn't score, he still impacts the game in a positive way, and that's what you need from a hockey player.
It feels like that's been the best viewpoint to take with him. That don't look at a ceiling. Don't
No.
just see what becomes.
Right.
Who knows what it is?
That's right, but he's giving himself the best chance. By having the other pieces in place, he's giving him the best chance to reach whatever that ceiling is. Sorry to cut you off. Did I cut you off?
No, not at all.
Sometimes I talk too much.
No.
You may have noticed.
We want you to talk, that's what we want.
I know.
When you took over, the focus was wins and losses. We heard that from upper
Yeah.
management, we heard that from you. But we also heard from you that it was important to get the team's mindset in the right place. How are you feeling about both the mindset at this point and coming up on almost 20 games, just the wins and losses record?
Well, I'll go back to the question. So what was our identity? I think we talked about it here when we first met the first time. We have to get back to our identity. So what is the Kings' identity? Now we'll back it up to the Kopi and Drew question. It is checking. It is working and checking and playing good without the puck, playing good defense. So if you look at the stats, you'd say, looks like the team's got a lot closer to that. They've recommitted to that, and now they're doing that. Now, layer on some more offense. I get that piece for sure. So I think we're a lot closer to getting our identity back, but in games where you need to win, there's a desperation level that I think still can go higher. And so that's the piece that I'm more focused on. I think we're playing pretty good defense. And with that comes more offense. It's a little more, it's hard. It's hard. It's harder now than it was in October. It's harder to get to the net, harder to get a shot. And you got to play a lot of even shifts and a lot of work and energy to come up even, just even, until the 1 or 2 opportunities you get to try to score.
Is that playing with a playoff mindset right now?
Well, I think, you know, all the teams that are in and around the playoffs and are fighting, they would tell you that it has to be that way, or else you're not going to give yourself a chance to get in. It's just there's just another level that it has to go to, and you know, for some teams maybe it comes a little bit later because they might have a bigger cushion. For the other teams, it's on right now.
Jim, Andres England's on track to play a full 82-game season, hadn't played 82 games in his entire career
Yeah.
before this year. Can you just talk about his impact to the team?
Yeah.
on the ice?
Well, I think there's things that go on with a player like Aggie that are unmeasurable. There's a strength, a physicality, and aggression that other people who sit in the room and sit beside him, they look over, they go, you know what? I'm glad Angie's in here. What does that do to their game? We can't measure that to the other players. But if you sat in the locker room with those guys, you want people that know if somebody's coming for me, I got somebody here that's going to take somebody on physically. It's a tough job. So there's that point right there, first of all. That's just the character and what he can bring from a physical perspective. Then there's going out and playing against a guy like Angie and trying to get to the net on him. And He's not friendly, and what happens sometimes is a couple cross checks, a couple physical plays in the corner. Then you get some seeds of doubt in your mind. Am I going there again? Am I eating another cross check from Engie? I'm going to get my face in the glass when he goes in hard and separates me and the puck stays behind, gives us an opportunity to break out. We don't necessarily break out, but he can kill the play, the puck's dead. Can we make the next play to break out? So those are some of the things for me that a player of Engie's stature, of his play style, that's important on any team.
Do you still see that type of player being important? Do you still see that type of player have a role in the NHL?
I do, yes, without a doubt, without a doubt. Every team looks for that guy. Some teams have them. Some teams, you know, they're all over the place. They're good, quality character players. Play the game hard.
And Jim, because of that, does that mean that sometimes advanced statistics and metrics and might be less meaningful for that type of player as opposed to accounting theology?
Yeah, if we get into advanced statistics, they measure certain things. They don't measure. I think, well, I'm not going to get into it too deep. They measure certain things, for sure. They don't measure other things that are important. And when you lump them all into one, and you say there are 5 guys on the other team, and 4 other teammates out there with you, usually at 5-on-5. Those 5 guys from the other team, and your 4 guys on your team, all have an impact on what goes on in certain situations. And it is impossible with some of the advanced metrics to account for all of that fairly. Good or bad. You can have good, you can have bad. That, to me, is not the measure of a player. There's a lot more that goes inside it that you have to watch as coaches, as scouts, because the game moves in a lot of different ways, and there's time and space, and there's reads that we have that are going in fraction of a second. And sometimes you make the right one and your teammate makes the wrong one, you look bad. Well, it wasn't actually you, that was your teammate. Everybody gets credited or debited a lot of times with equally. That's where, for me, it's you know, you got to be careful with it. It is a tool, there's no question, but you just have to have some checks and balances going in behind it by watching the game.